Hello, everyone. In the next 15 to 20 minutes, I'm going to take you through the impact of social media on us and the possible benefits that we can have, especially as anesthetists. This is a talk I gave recently in the Ganga Anesthesia Refresher course, which was held in Coimbatore. And I'm going to take you through the impact of social media in the next 20 minutes, as I said. Now, the disclaimer for this talk is that I'm active on many social media platforms, and that probably was the reason the organizers chose me to give a talk. And I'm still a human trying to make sense of this maze called social media. Now, the outline of my talk, I will take you through what the internet has done to our brains, how has it changed us, and we'll start off with a rhetorical question that social media is bad, and then we will explore how it can be used to improve our lives and how it can make us better anesthetists. So the entire thing started way back in 1400 with this gentleman, Gutenberg, who started the first printing press. Now, what it did way back in the 15th century was it led people to share ideas. It led them to express their thoughts about others' ideas. And this led to an explosion of ideas which were networked. Without this, we wouldn't have had the scientific revolution, the industrial revolution, and we wouldn't have been where we are right now. Now, let's fast forward to 2022. We are now dealing with a term called social media, which according to the Oxford Dictionary is websites and applications that enable users to create and share content or to participate in social networking. 15 to 20 years ago, socializing meant meeting with friends, having a jolly time, and this was how it looked. But now, this is how social networking is. Each of us have hundreds of friends on various social media platforms, and the more you have, the more impact you have, and you're called an influencer. If you look at the usage of most of the social media platforms, Facebook is heading the race with close to 2.9 billion people using it. And as you can see, YouTube, WhatsApp, Instagram, they're not small numbers. They are 1 billion plus. And what has led to this kind of explosion is the way we have evolved in using the internet. It all started with what we call as Web 1.0 now, wherein it was all text-based. I'm sure many of you who probably started using the internet in the 90s would remember this. Then the Web 2.0 started off sometime in 2000s, where we started having photos and audio being shared, and that has led to an explosion in social media content. Where we are heading ahead is further to video. We are looking at Web 3. Now, Web 3, as you can see here, is a user-centric, decentralized, private, and secure platform that's going to come up. And we are going to see an explosion of content in the coming decade. Now, when we look at how things have been in the last 15, 20 years, many of you might agree with me that there is a general sense that many of us have lost focus in what we do. There's a sense of cognitive overwhelm. There is a level of emotional anxiety which has crept into many of us using internet and phones and social media. There is a constant need for stimulus. And many of you will agree that there has been a diminished short-term and long-term memory, which we might be aware of or we might not be. Now, this led me to a book, The Shallows. Now, this is a wonderful book which talks about how the internet is changing the way our brains are wired. And the inference through this book was that the linear thought process that has been the fashion of thinking is no longer the fashion. The new trend is having short bursts of information where speed has become essential. And this has led to a changed behavior where there's a need to feed on new information. There's a yearning to connect every hour of the day onto the internet. And this has led to a decreasing attention span. Now, when we look at how memory is processed, it's very simple. You get the sensory input coming into the body. This goes into a very temporary memory called the sensory memory. And anything which is unattended is lost. We give attention to something and goes into short-term memory. Now, from the short-term memory, again, if you do not rehearse the information, that is lost. You don't remember it. But if you rehearse it in a proper fashion, then it gets encoded to long-term memory. Now, whenever the long-term memory is retrieved to short-term memory, it still has a potential to get lost. Therefore, a rehearsal and encoding is important for long-term memory. Now, what has internet done? It has decreased our attention span, and it definitely has affected the encoding process to long-term memory. Now, if we look at this rhetorical question that social media is bad, we need to think whether it's really bad and how we can kind of prevent it. Now, one of the things that the phone is being compared to nowadays is the slot machine. Now, this is a machine which is found in casinos where you just drop a coin and hope that you get a jackpot. That's what happens whenever we open the phone. What's happening and what is leading to this is the dopamine system in the brain. Now, the dopamine system is required for pleasure and reward-seeking behaviors, but more importantly, it is also involved in various other important things like movement and sensory stimuli, cognition, attention, and emotional behavior. Now, what happens when we pick up our phone and we're looking for likes on Facebook or any other similar social media platform? Whenever there's a like, the dopamine increases, feel happy, and after some time, the dopamine decreases, and therefore we pick up the phone again. This is what happens when it becomes a repetitive habit. That initially, if the first time when we get the unexpected reward, the dopamine surge is seen after seeing the reward. Whereas when we know that we are going to get an expected reward, the dopamine surge happens with a cue, like a notification ping. And if the dopamine surge, which happens with the cue, is not emphasized by actually a like or something positive on the notification, then you get a drop in dopamine, which will lead to frustration and other negative feelings. Now, this is a small cartoon here, which gives you an example of how this negative prediction error can affect somebody. So this will make somebody looking for likes and comments on social media platforms. Now, we can always argue whether the social media that we consume, is it an entertainment product? We have to remember that what the platform is doing is it's actually grabbing our attention and selling it through ads. The data that we give to these platforms is sold to the rest of the world, and data is money, as you all know. And everyone else is producing the content. The platforms are just aggregating it, and we are the consumer. But sometimes we might be producing the content and others are consuming. So it's not an entertainment product. So this actually helps us understand how a media platform works. But you might argue and say that it's harmless fun, isn't it? We are just spending some time on the phone. We are not hurting anybody, or it's not causing any damage. Now, this is anything but harmless. If you look at a network in the brain called the Salience network, it is something which comes in between a resting mode, which is called the default mode network, and another network called the central executive network, which is activated when we do cognitively difficult jobs like calculating or deciding key things. So when we do all that, we get the central executive network activated. Now, what the researchers have found through what we call as fMRI studies is that this salience network regulates our conscious decision making, attention, and the stimuli. And the network gives priority to 4 types of stimuli, which is anything novel and unexpected, anything which is pleasurable and rewarding, personally relevant, and emotionally engaging. Now, I'm sure all of you will agree that these are the 4 types of stimuli which you get when you use social media. Now, research which has been done, especially in the last few years, show that there is decreased functional connectivity between the salience and the central executive network in problematic smartphone users. So there is something going wrong. There is something going wrong with the hardwiring of the brain that will make it difficult for us to do deep work and thinking. This was again another article which came out a few years ago, where they showed that there is rapid exhaustion of limited attention resources when we are using internet and especially the smartphone and social media. So social media now can be compared to what cigarettes were probably in the 1970s, fashionable at that time, but later they found out that it does cause cancer. So social media is dangerous, but is there a way you can control it? Now, Android and iOS platforms have inbuilt systems where you can see how much you're using. So this is an example of my phone where you can go into the settings. You can see there is another small heading here called digital well-being and parental controls. You open it and it'll tell you how many minutes you've been using. Now, 18 minutes, this was early in the morning. So I've been using probably 18 minutes in the morning. And then if you look back into what you've been doing the previous days, you see that this is an example of what I did a week ago. I used the phone for 3 hours, 20 minutes. And this is generally the average time that people use, especially in the US. We have data from the US where a user will use it for approximately 4 hours. So this is what I've been using the previous day. And this will also tell us how many notifications we have had the previous day. Now you can imagine if you have a ping tone for every notification, this will drive us crazy. 854 notifications. So this is how involved we are with social media nowadays. Now, when we look at this paper, which looked at social media and well-being, the pitfalls, progress, and next steps, they said that the social media can evoke positive and negative feelings based on individual differences and cultural differences. The individual differences and cultural differences goes through these gears of self-presentation, sharing emotion, and other similar kind of aspects, which can further lead to the person having a negative or a positive feeling in well-being. So it's important to kind of keep in mind that whenever we post something, it can affect somebody both positively and negatively. So how can social media make me better? Now, this is a question which we want to address. Now, when we look at anesthetists in general, why do we use social media? We use it for professional networking. We use it for professional education, patient care, public health programs, and also to build a brand value, especially those anesthetists who are doing exclusive practice, such as chronic pain or even intensive care medicine. Now, one of the commonest things that we use for a lot of things is what is the WhatsApp group. Now, WhatsApp group has been used for running departments across the world, for executing projects, especially bigger events like workshops or conferences. It's used to keep in touch with friends and family, as we all know, and miscellaneous things where you've been added to the certain groups, like, I've been added to groups for photography. So you might have been added to groups for running or swimming or something like that. Now, what it has done, the WhatsApp group, it has replaced the age-old email list which we used to have. And it has advanced to such a level that even there are books written for how to conduct and what to do and how to control WhatsApp groups. Now, if you look at what kind of content comes in WhatsApp, now this statistic that we have, if you look at the Indian data, you can see that scares and scams, national myths, and current affairs dominated most of the content coming on private networks named WhatsApp. And if you look at how often do people believe the information on WhatsApp, you can see that 8.2% always believed, then 12.7 often, but the main thing is only 14.5 never believed whatever came on WhatsApp. So there is an element of belief that the WhatsApp message which is forwarded is true to some extent, which is not a good indicator of spreading correct knowledge or news. So what other platforms are we using? Now we have LinkedIn, where many doctors and administrative personnel of hospitals link with each other and share content about what they're doing. There is, of course, Facebook, where we have the Anesthetist Society with more than 6,000 members, and the Anesthetist group with close to 31,000 members, which probably is the biggest group of anesthetists in any social media platform, headed by Dr. Shivkumar Singh from the UK, where a lot of content is discussed on both these groups, which are very beneficial when it comes to spreading knowledge. Then coming to video. Now, this is something where we have seen a big evolution with the way we are making content, especially after we had the COVID crisis. And this is a very popular page in YouTube where regional anesthesia content is discussed and a lot of blogs are demonstrated. So video is gaining popularity because traditional lectures can be viewed multiple times, you can pause and rewind. The video demonstrations can be demonstrated very well. Then we have the learners who influence the future content by good feedback. And of course, it's searchable. So if you want to search for anything, you just have to type in and you get the demonstration within seconds. And you can follow a channel where you receive updates about anything new that's coming up. Blogs are again a good way of spreading knowledge. And this is one of the popular blogs that we have in medicine called kevinmd.com, where there's a lot of discussion about the various fields of medicine and what's happening. Now, there are a few guidelines for being professional on social media. Now, one of the first things is to pick a professional handle and keep it consistent across the platforms. We have to respect privacy, especially of the patients, and we should never share protected health info. We should never post anything when angry, and we should always strive for accuracy. It's important that we do not provide personal medical advice on any of the platforms. And one of the important things to make it properly professional is to have a proper photograph as a profile picture. It's important to connect with other anesthesia social media influencers because they will be looking at the most trending topics, and it's easier to gain knowledge in that manner. And we should always think, what value are we bringing to our followers? And therefore, the post should be meaningful. Now, coming to the dangers of what can happen with social media, if we pass on poor quality of information, that's not the right thing. This can in turn damage our professional image. And if we breach patient privacy or violate the patient-doctor boundary, it can lead to licensing and legal issues. Now, it brings to the main part of my talk, which is the use of Twitter. Now, this is a page of Academy of Regional Anesthesia on Twitter, where we post new content every week. And you can see there are some excellent diagrams and teaching which happens on this platform. Now, what is Twitter? Now, Twitter is what otherwise can be called as a microblog, where there's a limit on the number of words that we can use or characters that we can use. So it leads to summarized perspectives. There's no long story here. It's all very brief. It's a platform which allows for comments and questions. It's a platform where there's an access directly to the authors, we can directly message them. And it's very useful to identify knowledge gaps on either side of the tweet. We can use it to run courses where educators can send reminders to the learners. And one of the important things which Twitter is used for is if you pose a clinical question, there is rapid crowdsourcing of the answers. Now, why should you be on Twitter? One of the important things to be on Twitter is global interaction. You can connect with anesthetists, or if you're a doctor of another profession, with your own professional colleagues anywhere in the world. You can interact with the top people in your field. You can optimize the search. So example, if you're searching for tweets only on difficult airway, you can use a hashtag of difficult airway and find all the tweets on difficult airway. It's a lifelong learning platform wherein you can teach at the same time you can learn from the gurus in the field. And another important thing is if you're into research, you can promote your research. And one of the key things with research is many of the articles that are published are either read only by the author or by the reviewer and the editor. So it's important for you to reach out to other doctors, and Twitter is a very good platform. And finally, we can enrich a conference experience, and I'm going to go into detail as to how that can be done. So this, one of the key champions of propagating Twitter has been Dr. Ed Mariano from Stanford. And this is a summary of his thoughts on why we should be using Twitter. That is for research and practice exposure, to improve global interactions, and for lifelong learning. So how do we get started? Now, the first thing is we have got to register on Twitter, get an account, and get a nice handle. Now, the more you delay it, the lesser your choice will be, as just an email addresses. Update the profile, put whatever you do as a professional, and then also a couple of lines on your hobbies. Start following a few accounts of people that you know. And then you can search for hashtags which you think are important. So if you're an anesthetist, you search for anesthesia. If you're an orthopedician, you might search for similar hashtags. And then you start by sending a tweet, connecting with people, and then the learning journey continues. So how do we tweet? Now, this is Dr. Hari Kalagra from the US. He's a champion when it comes to ultrasound and focus. Now, his tweet here is an example of what a good tweet should look like. So one, he uses a hashtag of focus at the start. So he started off with a hashtag. So this is easy for search. So the next time I search for focus, I'll get his tweet up there. He uses an article link. So he's pointing us to an article which talks about something important. Then he tags or adds people there who might be interested in this article or who might be experts to comment on this article. Then, of course, he uses a picture because a picture tells 1,000 words. So there is a picture here which catches our attention. And finally, he tags people who again might be interested or who are involved in writing this paper. So all these are good tips when it comes to starting Twitter usage and tweeting. So there are tips to increase impact, as we saw. One, the size of network is important. So over a period of time, it compounds and you build a good network. You need to select timely topics with high public interest. So anything outdated will probably not generate good interest. Use personal Twitter accounts, not business accounts, because they have high engagement. And as we saw, attaching a media will increase the tweet engagement by a factor of close to 3. And use hashtags wherever possible, but don't overdo it. And this can be used to create buzz before an event you're hosting, like a workshop or a conference. Now, what are the things happen on Twitter? Journal clubs happen. So this is a hashtag where there's a journal club which happens. So you get updated every few minutes of any discussions that are happening there. Then this is the American Society of Anesthesiologists patient helpline, which can be used for patient communication. And If we look at research, as I already mentioned, this paper showed us that the more the tweets that a paper had, the more citations it had after 3 to 4 months. So the visibility which the paper had an impact on the citations later. So as we all know, the higher the citation of an article, the better it is. And of course, the impact factor of a journal is decided on the number of citations that the articles from that journal are generating. So coming to meeting. Now, whenever there's a scientific meeting, you wish sometimes that you were in another hall listening to a good talk by a speaker, but at the same time, you don't want to sacrifice the talk that you're presently listening to. So there are a lot of benefits. One is, how do we start? So we need to start by tagging the tweets with the event hashtag. So example, we had the Ganga anesthesia refresher course where I gave this talk. We had a hashtag GARC 2020. Now, what does it do? It provides value to others. The tweet, which has insights and photos from the talk, will give a glimpse to others who are not there in the meeting as to what's happening. Main thing is, when we tweet about these events, we should not binge tweet. We should not be tweeting every second. And we should make sure that we give correct attribution to tag the speaker, quote them. So to actually highlight what they are telling, and that should be done correctly. Now, all this will lead to improving interaction with others. And we need to be a bit social when we talk about this. It needn't be serious. So this is an example of our first experiment in India with tweeting a live event of anesthesia. So as you can see, there is a tweet by Dr. Megha here, which gives us a brief overview of what Dr. Karunakaran was talking about during this talk. And then we have other tweets which are on various other aspects of the conference. Now, this is again another event which happened last week. This was the Regional Anesthesia UK and ISURA meeting. And as you can see here, the impact that it had was over 20 million impressions. So they had 4,000 tweets from this event, and there's a lot of learning that happened. So I was able to sit at home and see what was happening in an event which was happening in Edinburgh. Now, the benefit of this is there is immediate and widespread dissemination of the updated knowledge. There can be collaboration and engagement across various teams across the world. A discussion can promote new research ideas, and with sharing of data, there is faster advancement of therapies and therefore patient benefit. The other subjects apart from anesthesia or our medicine can also be learned. So I would like to call this as a Twitter university, because you can follow subjects you like. It could be gardening, it could be finance, it could be painting, or it could be something as simple as carpentry. There's experts of all subjects out there. And you get to directly interact with the top people in the world, and you can enjoy the learning. So an example here is a few things. One on personal development. So there's a tweet thread here. Tweet thread is nothing but series of tweets. So 21 lessons learned in 2021 by Sahil Bloom. Then we have how to make a good PowerPoint presentation by Chrisman. And there is another one here which talks about how to kind of spend money. So these are kind of examples of what else you can learn on Twitter. So it can be used to enhance personal growth by inspiring and challenging others, and also get inspired. We should be relatable to what we are talking about, and we should always try to speak the truth. We should engage in Twitter chats. That's a good way of actually improving our knowledge. And whenever you post a message, it should be with a purpose. And over a period of time, you should establish yourself as an expert, making sure that you ignore the ones who are trying to bring you down. So there's always negativity everywhere we go, whether it's workplace or in the society, and we should ignore the ones who are trying to bring you down. And we should work with a positive intent when we go on social media. So anesthetists, we are not lone mass individuals in wars across the world. We are pioneers when it comes to medical education, innovation, patient safety, communication, research, and much more. The world of anesthesia is talking, And social media is how you listen, especially when we look at social media. I'm mentioning more towards Twitter. And you should use the best version of social media that's available to ignite the best version of you. Thanks for listening. Have a good day.